Good morning, mathematicians. Today I want to show you this concept of borrowing with fractions. Before we get started on borrowing with fractions, let's just relate this concept to what we already know. If I were to ask you to take 17 away from 72, in whole number borrowing and regrouping, we know what to do. If I cannot take 7 away from 2, remember, I go to the nearest place value, I borrow, and I regroup in, of course, the neighbor place value. We know how to borrow and regroup in whole numbers, but now what we're doing is we're extending this concept to fractions. So this really isn't something brand new to us. It's just we're looking at it with another type of number. If I had this problem, boys and girls, and I had 7 1/2, and I'm taking away or losing 2 4/5, let's take a look at how that would work and what I would do. We have been practicing creating equivalent fractions so that we arrive at common denominators. With this practice, we know that we are going to look for the LCM of 2 and 5. The least common multiple of 2 and 5 is 10. As we've practiced, we have a missing factor problem. 2 times what gives me 10? Well, 2 times 5. Whatever I do to the bottom, I will also do to the top, and I arrive at 1/2 equals 5/10. I'll do the same thing down below. This is a missing factor problem. 5 times what gives me 10? Well, that's 5 times 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I must do to the top. 4 times 2 gives me 8. Now, I've created another equivalent fraction. 4/8 is equal to 8/10. 4/5 is equal to 8/10. Now, remember, I started with those whole numbers on this side. Feel free to rewrite those whole numbers so that, again, I'm looking at my problem here. I know that if I have 5/10, I can't take away 8/10. I must borrow from this 8. If I borrow from the 8 and make it one less, this becomes a 7. Now I have a whole floating around and I want to give that whole to this fraction so that I make it larger and I therefore can subtract. If I want to give one whole to 5/10, I ask myself, how will I do this considering that I have a fraction here with a denominator of 10? Just as we have been doing in this unit, we remember that fractions of 1 exist, and we can use these in order to make our computation more efficient. Here, if I add 10/10 to 5/10, I've given this one whole because 10/10 equals one whole. An efficient way to do this is just to give it the fraction of 1 that has the same denominator. When I add 5/10 and 10/10, I arrive at 15/10. That's what it looks like when I add this 10/10. Now that I have 15 as my numerator, I can subtract. Here I have 15 taking away 8. When I have 15 take away 8, I will get 7/10. Now I look at my whole numbers. 7 minus 2 gives me 5. And I arrive at 5 7/10 as my final answer. Boys and girls, the process at the beginning of getting that equivalent fraction where I have like denominators is the same. The skill that we are adding in here is this, the borrowing and regrouping of fractions.